This is the New Alliance Talk. Bioeconomy as a link between climate action and sustainable development. Please welcome to the stage Melina Walling from Associated Press.
Hello. Thank you all so much for being here today. I just want to give a really quick announcement first to say that part of this panel will be in French. So if you need a translation, please use the little devices here. Channel 1 is for English. So I am Melina Walling. I cover agriculture and climate change for the Associated Press. And we're here today to talk about bioeconomy. So what does bioeconomy look like? That could be farmers around the world selling corn and soybeans, or politicians making laws on their trade. It could be someone with a small skincare business importing sugar-based oils from Brazil or perfume scents from India. It's the way we buy the food that we eat and the clothes that we wear. And it's also connected to our governments, the policies they adopt when it comes to trade, and to the responsibility that countries and companies owe to tackle climate change. So all of our speakers today have different perspectives to share. I'm really excited to introduce all of them. So we have Dr. Rosalie Matondo. She's a teacher researcher and the Minister of Forest Economy in the Republic of Congo. We have His Excellency Roberto Jaguaribe, Ambassador of Brazil to Germany. We have Jukka Kantola, Chair at the World Bioeconomy Association and founder and CEO at the World Bioeconomy Forum. We have Dr. Éliane Ubalijoro, CEO of CIFOR-ICRAF, which is an international research center that studies forestry and agroforestry. And we have Avinash Persaud, Special Advisor on Climate Change to the President of the Inter-American Development Bank. So thank you all so much for being here. I hope you can come up on stage, but first we'll have Dr. Matondo giving some remarks, so go ahead.
Bonjour à tous, je suis très heureuse d'être parmi vous ce matin et j'aimerais remercier les organisateurs d'avoir invité la République du Congo à vous présenter tout ce que nous pensons par rapport à la bioéconomie. Alors, vous vous en doutez bien, mon ministère s'appelle déjà ministère de l'économie forestière. Alors, comment les ressources forestières peuvent contribuer à l'économie de notre nation? Dans les ressources forestières, nous avons au Congo 23,5 millions d'hectares de forêts tropicales humides et parmi lesquelles nous avons 15 millions d'hectares de forêts de production. Nous avons en dehors de cela des forêts pour la conservation de la biodiversité et nous valorisons les terres de savane avec des plantations forestières et agroforestières. Donc pour nous, la bioéconomie, c'est comment concilier la conservation de la biodiversité à une économie, à un développement économique qui peut permettre à notre pays de respecter les triptyques du développement durable. Comme vous le savez, nous avons l'essor économique, nous avons les populations autochtones et les communautés locales et puis nous avons la conservation de la biodiversité. Donc pour nous, aujourd'hui, le challenge, pour nous, c'est de savoir comment nous allons aller vers l'exploitation des ressources forestières puisque nous aspirons tous au développement. Nos pays aspirent au développement. Il ne s'agit pas ici de mettre sous cloche nos forêts, mais il s'agit de voir comment, effectivement, aller vers une économie durable avec nos ressources naturelles, que ce soit les ressources forestières, que ce soit les ressources minières, et en dehors de ça, comment lutter contre la pauvreté endémique que nous avons dans les écosystèmes forestiers au niveau rural. Donc c'est tout le challenge que nous avons et c'est l'importance de cette question parce que nous allons vers la comptabilisation de nos ressources naturelles, de notre capital naturel dans nos économies, notamment dans le PIB qu'on appelle le PIB vert. Et ça, c'est quelque chose de nouveau. Nos pays ont pris l'initiative. 15 pays du continent africain ont pris l'initiative, le Kenya et la République du Congo qui sont leaders de cette initiative, c'est de voir comment aller vers la comptabilisation du capital naturel dans le PIB de nos pays, ce qui jusque-là n'est pas fait. Deuxième chose et la dernière chose que je veux dire, c'est le fait que le Congo pense aussi que les plantations forestières et agroforestières, c'est vraiment la solution basée sur la nature que nous pouvons proposer au monde comme une économie, mais également pour lutter contre le changement climatique. Parce que nous voulons préserver les forêts naturelles, mais il faut une alternative. Et l'alternative, nous pensons que ce sont les plantations forestières et agroforestières qui ne contribuent pas à la déforestation, mais qui nous permettent effectivement de trouver des alternatives vers les produits forestiers ligneux, non ligneux à proposer donc dans nos économies. Et ça, la République du Congo a proposé une initiative au niveau mondial. Donc l'initiative qui aujourd'hui est adoptée par les Nations Unies, c'est la décennie des Nations Unies sur le boisement et reboisement pour la gestion durable du Congo qui a été votée ce 16 avril 2025 aux Nations Unies. Et grâce à vos votes, donc j'aimerais vous remercier. Voilà comment je veux terminer mon propos introductif dans le cadre de ce sujet très important pour nos communautés. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. All right, please, everyone else, come on up so we can get started. Thank you. So the first thing that I wanted to have us all do is just go down the line and let each speaker give in just a really quick kind of lightning round, 1 to 2 sentences about their definition of bioeconomy. And the reason I want to do that is because I talked a little bit at the beginning about the ways I've seen bioeconomy show up in my reporting or just as a person in the world. And I think by letting everyone give their definition of bioeconomy, I think we can get a hint into their perspectives. And yeah, so can we just all go down the line and share, how do you define bioeconomy?
Alors, en 2 mots, la bioéconomie pour moi, c'est valoriser les ressources naturelles. Ça peut être le bois, ça peut être l'eau, ça peut être l'agriculture à travers le sol, ça peut être les services environnementaux que l'humanité nous donne grâce à ces ressources naturelles. Donc la bioéconomie, c'est cette comptabilisation de nos ressources nationales qui contribuent à nos économies nationales.
Go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, first of all. This is a wonderful panel. We had the idea of doing that because bioeconomy is a fundamental element in Brazil's environmental and climate policy. But there's no multilaterally accepted common definition of what bioeconomy is. But it is what the 2 words say, bio and economy. It's the generation of resources of wealth, be it on products or services or energy or information, through the interaction between knowledge and bioproducts, biology in general. Of course, it has to be sustainable, and that's where the definition faces a problem, because we're always in an interaction between idealism and pragmatism. And it's something that must be combined. And this is where we'll find the right path. If either one prevails, we're not going to get anywhere.
Thank you. Avi?
I think there are dangers in being too prescriptive. Unlike in climate, it's one of those examples where the bio space and the climate space don't overlap completely. But I think bioeconomy, it's an activity, it's a livelihood that is boosting nature capital. It is not reducing it. It's not an extractive industry.
Thank you. Éliane?
So we see the bioeconomy at CIFOR-ICRAF as playing a critical role in supporting food systems, sustainable development, and climate resilience. We define it as the production, use, and conservation of biological resources, including the ecosystem services, provisioning, regulating, supporting, and cultural that undergird sustainable and equitable development. And we support the socio-cultural biodiversity definition often used by indigenous populations in Brazil. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, grüß Gott. My name is Jukka Kantola, also the World Bioeconomy Association. And for us, the bioeconomy is a balanced and sustainable economic system based on 3 interconnected visions that we keep on saying. first of all, a sustainable use of biological resources. I think that's quite sort of, let's say, traditional way of thinking, okay, bioeconomy, but that exists. Another thing is that, okay, the advanced biotechnological solutions, actually that's one of the main reasons that, okay, why they are talking about the biorevolution is on. There are a lot of opportunities related to, okay, the biotechnology. And on the other hand, the balancing fact is that, okay, it's strengthening with the ecological systems. So it's all about, okay, driving prosperity while regenerating nature and reducing dependence on fossil-based resources.
Thank you. I really appreciate all of your perspectives. I think it's a great way to kick this off. So I want to start first, Dr. Matondo, how do you think traditional knowledge fits into the modern bioeconomy? And when have you seen modern and ancestral or indigenous practices blend and learn from each other successfully?
Il le faut. Peut-être que ce n'est pas assez mélangé aujourd'hui, mais nous savons bien que nous avons des connaissances ancestrales dans nos écosystèmes forestiers parce que nos populations vivent à l'intérieur de ces écosystèmes forestiers. Il n'y a pas une forêt et les populations à côté, non. Les populations autochtones vivent à l'intérieur des forêts et les forêts, les écosystèmes forestiers, c'est leur garde à manger, c'est leur pharmacopée, c'est là-bas qu'ils vont pour trouver leurs médicaments, c'est là-dedans qu'ils vont pour trouver la nourriture. Et donc pour nous, ce qui est important, c'est le transfert de technologies dans le cadre des partenariats, tels que vous avez constitué cette table ronde. C'est important que nous ayons un partenariat agissant qui affecte les communautés locales dans le bon sens. C'est-à-dire que s'il y a une pratique qui est durable, s'il y a une pratique qui est intéressante pour valoriser donc une ressource naturelle, nous pouvons la pondre pour l'emmener vers nos communautés qui vivent à l'intérieur de ces écosystèmes et qui ont été des gardiens de ces écosystèmes depuis des millénaires. Donc c'est nous qui venons, nous venons des villes avec nos machines pour détruire ces écosystèmes. Mais nos communautés locales ont depuis des millénaires conservé ces écosystèmes parce que c'était leur lieu d'habitation, c'était leur habitat, c'était leur garde à manger et c'était leur pharmacopée.
Thank you so much. I want to ask a really quick follow-up question to that. I want to ask it to Dr. Ubalijoro, because we talked a little bit about how it's so difficult sometimes to convince people, to do things in a sustainable way. Or I'm just wondering if you can connect the dots between some of the traditional practices that we just talked about and maybe like the right way. What's the right way to develop a bioeconomy sustainably?
So one of the things that's really important is how do we use the bioeconomy to tackle the interconnected global challenges of food security, biodiversity loss, and climate change, and resource scarcity. And so while we're creating employment and income opportunities, so it's really important that we take the best of traditional and indigenous knowledge that has been honed over millennia, and also look at the digital world we live in. And so how do we bring these different knowledge systems together to really ensure that we look at the natural world and the intelligence embedded in the natural world, and we become stewards of this natural world. And how do we do that? Going and building economies that are really beyond the simple definition of capitalism, but really looking at natural capital, human capital, social capital, and how are we accounting for these different forms of capital, while at the same time bringing the profitability necessary for sustainable livelihoods.
Thank you so much. So now I think that's a really good segue. Ambassador Jaguaribe, can you talk about the role that governments and the private sector both play in this process of the global bioeconomy? And can you share some examples from your experience as an ambassador to illustrate that?
Well, bioeconomy has been present in so many different sectors, and we have to make the best of it, because ultimately, sustaining sustainability depends on our capacity of generating wealth from sustainability. If we don't generate wealth from sustainability, sustainability cannot be sustained. And bioeconomy is one of the means that we find very promising to do that. It encompasses agriculture, forestry, bioenergy, bioindustry, biotechnology. Of course, the health industry relies enormously on bioeconomy. Unfortunately, they do not share, but they depend enormously on bioeconomy. Also on traditional knowledge, which again, they use but do not share. But the experience is very, very thorough. In the case of Brazil, it's completely encompassed in many different policies. One of the most successful policies is bioenergy. And we have policies for bioenergy for the past 50 years with extraordinary success, including, of course, bioethanol, which has avoided the emission of 1 billion tons equivalent of CO2 and continues to avoid every year 40 million tons of emission. And so these were framed by the government originally not for sustainability purposes, but for economic purposes, which is essentially bioeconomy. And because of that, we are evolving in many different directions, including agriculture, the bioinsumes for agriculture. You need to have regulations that induce private sector to do that way. Without the private sector, any talk about sustainability, again, is not sustainable. You have to lead the private sector in this direction, and government does the leading part. They have to attain to that. So it's a combination. I don't want to dwell into that, but it has to operate together. And as I said, always a combination between idealism and pragmatism. If you're too idealistic in your regulation, you're not going to get anywhere. You have to have a combination which allows private sector to have what they want, which is profit. And they can generate profits for sustainability. But another challenge that we, from developing countries, have to continuously face is what I call environmental neocolonialism, which is sustainability there, development here. And this is something that is very acute, especially in Europe, where you have destroyed all the forests, but you need, and so you have to have balance in relation to this sector as well.
Thank you. Avi, I think that ties in really well with some of the things that you've talked about. So can you talk a little bit about maybe climate finance and how that connects to bridging this one side and the other?
Sure. And I think Latin America in general and the Amazon in particular has shed a really interesting light on the bioeconomy and climate. So in climate, 75, if you think of the world as a whole, 75% of harmful emissions comes from the energy sector, generating energy. In Latin America, it's less than half. In Latin America, land use and agriculture represents almost half of all emissions. And so we can't think about the climate without thinking about the forest, about the Amazon, about agriculture, and so we have enormous task, but a different focus. And what we've learned in protecting the forest, and we've learned that in the Congo, we've learned that in the Amazon, is that the way to do that is by creating alternative livelihoods. If we don't create alternative livelihoods, people will cut down the forests. That is their livelihood. And so we need to create an alternative, profitable livelihood. And we have found in trying to do that you can do it in a bio-positive way, in a nature-positive way. They are agroforests, as was mentioned at the beginning in the earlier remarks. Agroforestry, which done with the right water management. The forests are the parents of all of our rivers. The forests hold the rivers and the water. And we can do water management and soil management in agroforestry that actually is building nature capital. And so we, the Inter-American Development Bank, is working with Brazil and other Latin countries, where we've created a scheme called Amazon Forever. And we need to preserve our forests forever. They are critical to humanity. Tropical forests forever. Yeah. And it is, we're spending about $4 billion across 192 projects, which are really about identifying these profitable agroforestry areas, projects and products, and let's scaling them up. And my final remark will be touching on what you called very interestingly the kind of new colonialism. In how do we help develop this economy the buyers are important to that. And the buyers establishing their sustainable value chains are important in that. But they can't do that unilaterally. They can't do that in an ad hoc way where they change whatever they feel like on an annual basis. That provides no ability for our producers to really focus and sustain a agroforestry and a sustainable nature positive business. So we need to do this in an international way, in a stable and credible way. I believe that we're a little bit off track on that, but that's where we need to head to.
Thank you so much. Dr. Ubalijoro, can you talk a little bit more about the positive impacts that the bioeconomy can have on, maybe not just on affecting climate change, but also on producers, on the people who are on the ground?
Yes. So I came to Hamburg from Indonesia, where I'd been for 2 weeks, where one of our headquarters is based, and our other headquarters is in Nairobi, where we've been doing agroforestry since 1978. So one of the things that's really important in the work we do is really around development of sustainable and inclusive value chain for forestry and forest products. And this includes mechanisms to share information, benefits, risk among smallholder farmers, cooperatives, and business partners. So it's really people-centered. We work to leverage finance to ensure that these value chains deliver both social equity and environmental performance. And so when I visit with farmers, whether it's in Pará in Brazil, or in Indonesia, or in Rwanda, for example, everywhere I go, what I find is the work we do is really about empowering farmers to be stewards of nature, but also to have livelihoods that thrive through forest and agroforestry systems that help preserve the forest, but create corridors for nature, while also looking at local food security and ensuring that we're building the resilience for climate change, and we're building soil health. And as we build soil health and soil cover, those green rivers are created. And so that's how we preserve the water that's so needed, not only for rural areas, but for our cities. One other thing we also see is it's really important to not replicate extractive or monoculture-based approaches and address inequities in access to land, finance, and knowledge, and ensuring that policies are integrating, aligning climate, biodiversity, and development goals. So we work locally with policymakers around the world to do that. And we also believe that monitoring is really important. So we have assessment, robust tools that help us look at baselines and help de-risk investments in this space.
Thank you so much. Jukka, I want to go into some of the specifics about the different products that make up the bioeconomy. And can you talk to us about which of those product categories might have the biggest opportunities and which might have the biggest challenges to contribute to sustainability?
That's not a small question.
I know it's a big question.
I try. But as you see that we have a diverse group, and also the bioeconomy do have a diversity in place. So let me think about that a bit. But I think the bioeconomy is more common than we think. It's everywhere. It's what we eat, what we wear, what we build, what we heal, what we move. It's have a, let's say, interconnection towards our everyday life. Yeah. I keep on saying this, bioeconomy concept, what I said in the beginning, that there are these visions that I think this allows us to sort of, let's say, acknowledge that there are different scopes of the bioeconomy. But through this three vision thinking, you could then put them all in the same basket. Actually, that was the basis also for G20 last year, when Brazil introduced these high-level principles on bioeconomy. I think most of you have seen that. That's an excellent documentation what we are talking about the bioeconomy, and it's not long. It's only one pager. It's 10 points, but it captures very well that what we mean by the bioeconomy. It's have an interconnection with the climate change mitigation. It's have an interconnection within biodiversity, socioeconomics. All are covered with the one pager. I really recommend you to have a look on that. But nevertheless, getting back to these bioresource products, that what do we mean by these? These include the bio-based materials like wood construction elements. We're talking about already the forest. We talk about like the textiles. 70% of our textiles are based on petrochemicals today. So there's a lot of opportunities to move on to the bio-based solutions. Natural, the fibers, biofuels, and even packaging made from the agricultural residuals. These are not often that most visible by the consumers and represent the area of the fast growth, particularly replacing fossil-based materials. But they are also face challenges around land use, resource efficiency, and scalability. So when we are talking about the financing these aspects, it's very much about, okay, how do we do that in a sustainable manner? And that's actually the biggest part of the bioeconomy, and I think it is most common for all of us who are here. But when it comes to the another pillar, what I mentioned, is about the biotechnology pillar, perhaps the most dynamic at this point of time. Then we are talking about the bioplastics, then we are talking about enzymes, then we are talking about the biopharmaceuticals, microbial fermentation and synthetic biology. This is a growing area of the bioeconomy, and it's quite polarized at this point of time. Did you know that, okay, out of the biotechnology patents today, 70% of them are filed either in US or China, and 60% of the investments of the biotechnology are taking place in the US. So in a way, if we're now talking about industrial revolution, there's a notion of the bio-revolution is about knocking on the door. And there's there's a notion of that, okay, in which direction the world will develop. I think okay, all of us should have a look on this biotechnology and the opportunities what relies on it. So at the last, the bioecology, it's sort of balancing factor in between this bioresource vision, biotechnology vision, and the bioecology. We just cannot forget that. That's the source of the biodiversity. So we need to leave some space for the conservation and versatile role of the forest. We were already talking about that. So you need to balance it between these aspects. And each region, north, south, do have their own priorities on these. But this three-vision thinking allows us to explain that what do we mean by the bioeconomy. Today, there are 25 national bioeconomy strategies, and we make a survey against these three pillars. And I think it would be helpful also the ones who are contemplating whether moving to this bioeconomy strategy. So, some notion. Back to you, Melina.
Thank you so much. Avi, you said something in one of your answers earlier that I just want to bring up because you said the words off track. And I'm wondering why you think that, or what the bioeconomy can do to get more on track. And sorry if I brought that up out of the blue, but I was just thinking about it. I was like, that's really interesting, yeah.
So one of the things I think we've all mentioned about the importance of the whole value chain. We have buyers taking a more active approach in understanding where their supplies come from. That's a good thing. But there are multiple motivations behind them doing that. And they're not often seeing how that might impact that value chain. Agriculture has a huge amount of heterogeneity. You know, when we try to think about interventions to support the bioeconomy, we realize that there's no one size fits all. We're talking about a lot of small farm holders and a lot of large, big farm holders. We're talking about indigenous populations and Afro-descendants living on marginal land. We have to come up with interventions that are making sure that they're inclusive in how they're addressing all of this. And I think that we need to bring this into a greater degree of a rule-based system, but rules based on a more inclusive understanding of all the parts of that value chain if we're going to be effective in supporting the bioeconomy.
Thank you so much. I think that ties well into a question for Ambassador Jaguaribe. What are the most promising areas that you see in the bioeconomy that you think could drive sustainable growth? And are any of those markets at risk themselves as climate change escalates?
Well, I think that we need, first of all, to retain on a broader level the capacity to find adequate regulation globally. And that means a continuous multilateral effort. Without multilateralism and multilaterality, we cannot find solutions for global issues. And all of these require some sort of concession, including one which was just mentioned. We cannot attempt to say what is sustainable for one city to the whole world. To a certain extent, we see that a lot. It depends not just on the biome, it depends on the economic and on the social and the political. At every different level, you have different solutions that have to be taken into account. So again, the dispute between idealism and pragmatism, you take a tremendously idealistic proposal and you are in fact increasing emissions because you're not tolerating a multitude of other solutions that could be made use of. So I think we must have the framework for working this issue throughout. Brazil introduced this issue in the G20. South Africa is going to pick it up. I think this is a good situation where we can continue to have this dialogue. The fact that there's this rupture of multilateralism cannot be accepted. We must continue working on this framework. In relation to the different levels, there are so many. I will talk about what we do in Brazil. For us, as you have said, emissions come from land use. We are attempting to reduce dramatically land use emissions and make carbon neutral and sometimes even carbon negative agriculture. For that, we need bioinsumes, biodefensives. There's an enormous promise, not just promise, a reality. We're increasing every day the use of these things in order to do away with other chemicals that are not appropriate for the environment. There's a continuous improvement on natural methods of plantation, which have been an enormous success, including in the amount of the results that we have. Then there's the biorefinery dimension with plastics and all of that, all the universe that this opens for this affecting the whole environment, you know, the oceans, everything because of this problem. And finally, enormous progress can and has been achieved in the health sector, and will continue to do so. We have devoted a lot of energy and many different projects for that. In the health sector, I cannot fail to mention the fact that a lot of benefit is being taken from traditional knowledge and from elements that are found that could be used to drive sustainability, especially in the populations from which these knowledge is derived, but it's not being geared in that direction. Even sometimes, you know, I was president of our National Institute of Industrial Property. We cannot even use the name Amazon to sell products from the Amazon. Because, there is an imbalance that has been created, and I think the whole intellectual property issue sometimes plays a role in this imbalance, and in the health sector and in others. But there are in numerous areas, and my colleague to the end, the extreme here, mentioned many of the different areas where we can pursue bioeconomy and make it wholer, again, with two things in mind. First of all, sustainability, because we are facing a huge challenge in this direction, but also overcoming poverty, because as many have already implied, poverty is one of the main sources of natural degradation. And people in these areas, they're not entitled just to survive, they're entitled to prosperity. And we have to find the means to seek. And of course, bioeconomy is one of those roads, not the only one, but one of those roads.
Thank you. Dr. Matondo, I think this would be a good time to, oh, sorry, yeah. I was just going to ask, as you were talking about this mixture of technology in the future and also about people's livelihoods, Dr. Matondo, I was just going to ask how you've seen the bioeconomy change in your time as a scientist and as a politician. And how has your view of the bioeconomy changed as a result?
Merci infiniment. Je prends l'exemple des pays du bassin du Congo. Nous avons plus de 260 millions d'hectares de forêts les plus intactes au monde. Au niveau de la République du Congo, c'est 1% uniquement de la déforestation. La question qu'on se pose, en fait, qu'est-ce que nous apporte le fait qu'on a entrepris beaucoup d'efforts à conserver ces forêts? Qu'est-ce que nous avons eu comme retour par rapport à la reconnaissance de ce que nous faisons à protéger ces forêts. Donc, le grand défi aujourd'hui pour nous, chercheurs, politiques, hommes d'État, c'est de savoir comment concilier effectivement le développement que nos pays ont besoin, dont nos pays ont besoin, avec donc ces ressources naturelles, ces richesses que nous avons dans nos sous-sols, dans nos forêts, les richesses en eau que nous avons. Vous devez savoir que le bassin du Congo, c'est lui qui alimente en eau tous les pays du nord, d'Afrique du Nord. S'il n'y a pas les forêts du bassin du Congo, on aura une crise de l'eau ailleurs. Donc, en tant que chercheur, aujourd'hui, c'est de savoir quelle est la démarche que nous allons prendre pour que, d'un côté, quand j'ai une aire protégée, que cette aire protégée, à travers des financements internationaux, à travers des paiements pour services environnementaux, vienne contribuer au développement de la localité, là où il y a l'aire protégée. Où les communautés vivent, comme je l'ai dit, dans cette aire protégée. Parce que conserver pour conserver, on ne peut plus. Son Excellence, Monsieur l'ambassadeur l'a dit, nous avons des communautés qui vivent dans la pauvreté et nous ne pouvons pas les regarder dire allez-y conserver cette terre, allez-y conserver cette forêt, sans pourtant qu'il y ait des bénéfices pour ces forêts-là. Donc dans le cadre de mon exercice, c'est ce que j'ai dit, nous avons proposé des solutions, nous avons fait de la gestion durable des forêts, mais nous avons pensé que pour les communautés locales, c'est la forestation, le reboisement, l'agroforesterie que nous pouvons proposer aux communautés pour une agriculture durable, climato-intelligente, où les populations peuvent cultiver leurs terres, avoir des bénéfices sur leurs terres, mais en même temps faire de la conservation de la biodiversité de la forêt qui est à côté, parce qu'elles vivent à l'intérieur de cette forêt. Donc c'est le grand challenge que nous avons, capitaliser ou comptabiliser le capital naturel, mais en même temps permettre à nos communautés directement, donc on parle là de la macroéconomie et de la microéconomie. On ne doit pas voir uniquement les ressources en termes de macroéconomie, le pays va gagner, mais en dessous, qu'est-ce que les populations et les communautés locales gagnent? Et je crois que nous sortons, nous, de Brazzaville, où nous avons réuni le premier congrès des peuples autochtones des 3 bassins forestiers tropicaux. Les peuples autochtones, c'est ce qu'ils ont dit. D'abord, reconnaître nos droits sur les terres. Ensuite, que les financements soient directs et viennent impacter nos vies, là où nous vivons. Et ensuite, nous pourrons continuer à faire la conservation de la biodiversité comme nous le faisons tout le temps.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Jukka, I want to ask this question now. Do you think that companies and governments are on the same page when it comes to how they're defining the bioeconomy, how they think that the bioeconomy should develop? Or are there kind of 2 different perspectives there?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So what the short answer is not always. And but I think we are, let's say, they are getting closer to each other, thanks again to Brazil on the high-level principles on the bioeconomy, and we've been distributed also among the companies. So we need to have a common stock taking in order to make improvements in this space. So typically it is so that the government often approach bioeconomy from the policy and sustainability perspective, whereas the companies are looking after for markets and also economical markets. So there's difference in that respect. Also, if you have a look at I already said that there are 25 national bioeconomy strategies. We will hear maybe this year also from Brazil that will have the national bioeconomy strategy. But if you have a look on these, that certainly the scope is different. There might be the areas which do have which are rich on the bioresources, as we hear also in this panel. There might be the areas which don't have that much of the bioresources. Still, they could be active in the bioeconomy. For example, applying the biotechnology, utilizing CO2 from the atmosphere and cultivating that into biofuels, cultivating that into proteins. There are already companies who are operating this space, so they still belong to the same family. The issue I'd like to point out, even though it's less than 4 minutes to go, is that how we could then accelerate the bioeconomy. Then I think this is it's very, very important now we have this sort of common stock taking. I'm again referring to these high-level principles. So this is a sort of giving the basis And also last year was a lot of discussion that, okay, how to organize the financing arrangement, okay, this bioeconomy, and we will have a look on this sustainable financing. And we all know that, okay, its roots back in the 1970s, and it took decades and decades to develop that on that level we are today. And the sustainable finance is today something like $6 trillion US dollar. So it's quite remarkable. It's having already leverage power. If you go deeper on this sustainable financing, it's predominantly, let's say, related to climate change mitigation, which is certainly very important, and the biodiversity. But when you are investing in the bioeconomy, you are not getting a credit that you are reducing our dependence on fossil-based world. You are providing an environmental solution, for example, like these textiles. No, let's say, microplastics if you are using that as a bio-based. So that was also discussed last year. And there was a report on this financing a global sustainable bioeconomy, where we had a look on that okay, how you could then apply the existing, let's say, sustainable finance mechanisms in the bioeconomy. And there's some ideas that, how do you build up the adapter? I'm an engineer, so I use this terminology. How do you build up the adapter that you could then brought in the bioeconomy investment as a part of sustainability financing mechanism, which do already exist. And that work has been now carried on also by the South Africa. Last week there was G20 meetings. They carried on this bioeconomy initiative. They will have a look also at the financing. And I think there was sort of, let's say, understand it. We cannot wait again decades to get that the financing in place. We need to be faster. We need to be better in order to improve the developments of the bioeconomy. Back to you, Melina.
Thank you so much. I feel like we could all talk about this for quite a while. We have 2 minutes left, so.
But I'd like to introduce this issue that a number of people in the panel have talked about finance.
Yeah.
Finance is the problem we're facing here. We understand our problem. And I think people underappreciate the scale of the financial problem. What developing countries need to do, ex-China, on climate and the bioeconomy is $3 trillion per year. $3 trillion per year. All of the aid and development assistance in the world is $200 billion and falling. Down 7% this year, going to fall 20% next year. So even if aid were to double, and there's no sign of it doubling, we would not be there. So we need to have a financing strategy. And I think we do that we can get to these numbers by breaking them down into things that generate revenues. We talked about agroforestry. Things that generate savings, our investment in them today generates future savings, and things that are pure costs. So we need to direct the aid towards the things that are pure costs, which is a lot about dealing with the livelihoods and people and the suffering that they're facing. But with the savings, we need to make the development banks 3 times bigger so they can invest with low cost in things that generate savings, and we need to find ways of unblocking the flow of money for those things that do generate revenues. That's the only way we're going to get to $3 trillion. The biocredit, the carbon credit market, those markets are nothing. The voluntary carbon market has been around for 20 years, and after 20 years, it's $2 billion a year. And the problem is, it's voluntary. That's the problem. So unfortunately, it won't get us to the numbers we need.
If it worked, Brazil would be a very rich country.
Thank you all so much. Do I have can I get 2 more minutes to ask a final question? No? Okay. Well, y'all should probably find our panelists. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you all so much.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're doing a great job.
Brazil would be very rich if the carbon market worked.
Exactly.